Hi, my name is Verena Tetley,
And I'm Rich Tetley.
and we got married in 2009, and in 2012 we found out we were having a baby girl. And we were very excited, as most people are when they find out they're pregnant. Had a pretty good pregnancy, did all the regular ultrasounds and checkups, and around 32 weeks we went for one of those really cool 4D ultrasounds, and the technician mentioned that our daughter looked kind of small and maybe we should talk to our doctor about it. So our doctor suggested we go to see a specialist to have her measured and make sure everything was going okay. So we went to see a specialist the next day, and we had the ultrasound technician looking at her heart, and they said they needed to go find somebody else to confirm something for them. And they came back and asked us to come back the next day when the neonatologist was going to be there, which kind of scared us a little bit. And they mentioned they thought she had a hole in her heart, which was really scary. And we went home and we cried and we prayed. And the next day went back to see the specialist. And they spent a lot of time looking at her body and her heart and all her chambers. And then they all left the room and came back with the doctor. And he told us that she had a severe congenital heart defect. It was something that would require surgery right after her birth. And I remember sitting there in shock, not even knowing what to say or what to think. It was just unbelievable to fathom that our baby that had looked so healthy on so many ultrasounds all of a sudden needed something major right after her birth. And we immediately transferred our care to specialists up in Jacksonville. And the hospital in Jacksonville is equipped to handle surgeries on neonates after they're born. So we transferred care and started working with the University of Florida cardiology team in Jacksonville. And they did more ultrasounds on her and echocardiograms, fetal echocardiograms. It turns out that she did have a critical congenital heart defect, which means that in order to survive after birth, she would immediately require surgery or other intervention. Again, this was a huge shock to us, not even knowing what that was. There are a lot of babies that are born with holes in their hearts. 1 out of 100 babies are born with something wrong with their heart. And 25% of those require surgery right after being born. And our daughter, Johanna, was one of those babies. So for several weeks, we drove back and forth to Jacksonville to see specialists, monitoring her growth, making sure everything was okay. And we planned to deliver her right at 40 weeks, so nothing unusual there. We packed our bags and went up to Jacksonville. They did the whole getting you ready to have the baby thing. I had her in an operating room right next to the NICU at Wolfson Children's Hospital, and they took her over to the NICU right away. I did not get to hold her or spend time with her because it was so important that they check her out immediately after birth. From there, I went back to my room to kind of recover, and Rich was able to go spend some time with her in the NICU and got to hold her.
Which was quite an ordeal because she's tubes and wires everywhere, right? So she was hooked up to a bunch of leads, and she had 3 IVs, and they were pumping meds into her. And when I walked in, they were doing an echocardiogram on her, so I couldn't even hold her right away. And then when I did, I had to have a nurse help me because you got to negotiate all the wires. And so it was rough.
So they immediately started checking her heart. And we spoke with the cardiology team the next day, so the day after she was born. And they wanted to do a heart cath to go in and investigate her heart, look at all of the arteries and the veins and the chambers and see what would need to be done surgically to get her to a point where she would be able to come home. So we spent the first couple of days going back and forth to the NICU and spending time with her, and then walking out the door to leave her there. which is incredibly hard as a new parent to walk away and leave your baby in the intensive care unit. On day 3, she had a heart catheterization done, and her heart stopped during that heart catheterization.
For almost 3 minutes.
And they had to do CPR. And I remember waiting and waiting for the doctor to come talk to us. And he finally came and talked to us, and he said that her heart had stopped, and they did CPR, and things were a little bit more complicated than they had even imagined to begin with. They wanted to monitor her for a couple of days before they would even talk about surgery. They did think maybe she could have surgery within the first week. They wanted to check out her other systems and her other organs. And the next day they did a head ultrasound on her, and they found out she had had a bleed in her brain. And we, again, just didn't even know how to react. It felt like we kept getting punched in the gut over and over and over with awful news. And that led to a bunch of additional testing to see if she would be healthy enough to even survive heart surgery. So now, not only did we have cardiology involved with her care, we also had neurology involved with her care to make sure her brain was okay. They did determine that her brain did not have an active bleed, and they don't know where it came from, but they also don't know what it would mean for her future. However, it did mean that her heart surgery would be delayed for several weeks. And in the meantime, she would stay in the NICU. She would get medication to keep her heart working. And we would wait until she was cleared for heart surgery. So now we went from thinking she would be home in 2 weeks to thinking maybe she would be home in 2 months. And every day was scrubbing into the NICU like you're going to surgery, 3 minutes, scrubbing your arms and hands, just to go in and touch your baby's hand while you sat next to her. And in order to hold her, you would have to have a nurse pick her up, move dozens and dozens of wires and monitors, and put her in your lap, and then ask them to help you move her back. It was really hard. So she did end up having surgery at 4 weeks old. And I remember waiting through that surgery. And we were told initially that her heart would be repaired. She has a hole in her heart. She has basically no pulmonary artery, which is what leads to the lungs from the heart. We were told that in that first surgery that the heart would be repaired, the pulmonary artery would be patched over, and she would do well until she was an adult, hopefully. We sat through that surgery, and I remember the surgeon coming to see us. It took a long time to get her on bypass. It took a long time to get her off a bypass. And when we finally thought they were finished, the surgeon came to see us to tell us that they had not been able to do her repair. They put in a shunt to bypass the blood flow from her heart to her lungs, and they'd also found some other veins from the other lung that went to the wrong place. So she basically had a defect that somewhere around 1 in 25,000 people have. So they started to close her up, and while the surgeon was sitting there talking to us, her oxygen levels started to drop. He literally dropped his phone and ran out of the room and ran back to the OR. They weren't able to close her chest. They ended up bringing her up to the cardiovascular intensive care unit with her chest open, with the ECMO unit on standby in case her heart stopped. And then we just waited, and we waited for several days. Her chest was open for 3 days before they closed it.
I just did a mesh patch over her chest, and you pull the blanket back, and you could literally see her heart beating under the mesh.
Yeah, it was hard. It was really hard. The hardest thing for me was watching her with the trach in her mouth and her little eyes open, staring at me, and she couldn't move. Probably the hardest part of all this was that we knew that because they weren't able to repair her heart, it would mean that if she ended up going home, she would need another surgery in the near future. When she was big enough, or when her oxygen levels got to a point where they were so low that they would have to do another surgery. So she recovered very well from the first surgery, and she was able to come home when she was 6 weeks old. However, we knew, it was kind of bittersweet, because we knew that she was going to have another heart surgery. And within a matter of weeks or months, we would be right back in the operating room. We would be right back in the intensive care unit with her. And knowing that that was coming again, it felt like a boulder hanging over our heads. We're just waiting for it to drop. And when she was 7 months old, she had to go through another heart catheterization, again, to go in and look at her heart, look at what was going on. And they decided it was time to go ahead and proceed with her second surgery. So we took her back. We dropped her off for surgery, which was incredibly hard. But because she was still a baby, she kind of slept, and we just kind of handed her over. And at that age, she thought it was everybody was her friend, and she actually smiled, and while the nurses took her away from us. We waited through that surgery, and it went smoothly, and we thought that they were going to be able to repair her heart in that surgery, and that would be it for a long time. Then when the surgeon finally came to see us after the surgery, first of all, they had a hard time getting in to actually do the surgery. She had a scar tissue, and that took a couple hours to get into her chest. And then when they were finally done, the surgeon came to see us, and he said that they weren't able to repair the veins from the other side of her heart, and at some point she would need that repaired. And so for now, she was okay, theoretically. She actually did really, really well in her recovery with that surgery, and we thought that that was it for a while. We went to her first follow-up appointment 2 or 3 months after that surgery, and her heart was enlarging. Her pulmonary artery was not growing. It was tiny, 2 millimeters in diameter, which is almost nothing. Basically, almost no blood was going to her lung. And now we were looking at another surgery to actually open that artery back up. Because the right side of the heart was getting so big from trying to pump against that little artery. So now, again, she's now 10 months old, and she's got a third surgery looming ahead, and we don't know when it's going to be, and we don't know what the outcome is going to be. And we're looking at taking her to the intensive care unit, taking her to the doctor, taking her to the surgeon, and going through all of this a third time. We pursued lots of second and third opinions to make sure the doctors were doing the right thing. And she did end up having a third surgery earlier this year. And they put in a donor valve, and they repaired those veins from the other side of the heart. And she recovered very quickly from that surgery. However, the donor valve will only last for so long. It may last a year, it may last 5 years, it may last 10 years. The hope is that she'll go a long time before she needs another surgery.
So it's hard to remember all the details because it all just became such a blur. You first get the bad news that she's got a heart problem, and then you get the bad news that 3 days after she's born, her heart stops, and they've got to resuscitate her. And then you get the bad news that they can't repair her heart, and then the bad news that they can't close her chest. And then you finally get a little good news in that they can close her chest and you can go home with her, but there's another surgery coming. And then they get to that surgery and they can't repair that and everything there either. And it's just every time you turn around, it's like you get kicked in the gut. And at some point you just want to catch your breath, and it's like, I just don't know how much more can get thrown at us. And it becomes really tough. So we filled out when we found out about the heart, while Verena was still pregnant, we filled out a prayer request on the connection card. And it just started getting an army of people praying, as many people as we could. We started a Caring Bridge site, and people were signing up for it. They were getting their churches to pray, and we were getting messages from complete strangers just telling us that they were praying for us and praying for the baby, which is an amazing thing. We've all heard it said that we're God's feet and hands. And I believe that more than ever now, because of the way that God's family, our Christian family, reached out to us and really were God's feet and hands. They were there to comfort us, and they prayed with us. And thank God for Tomoka. Carrie Graham came up before the first surgery when we were in the middle of all this. Well, before that, she called and she prayed with us on the phone, and then she made the trip all the way to Jacksonville, into the wrong hospital at first, and then had to come find us, and really went out of her way to track us down, and spent most of a day at the hospital with us. And she got to see Johanna, and she prayed with us, and brought us some materials, much needed materials. We had not packed enough stuff for 6 weeks, some books and things to read and devotionals. And so we started going through devotionals, and we started going through, anything and everything that we could get our hands on faith, because at that point, our faith was really being challenged. And so that stuff was so timely. Every night we'd get back to the hotel room, because we couldn't stay at the NICU. You can't stay overnight there. And so we would have to leave her there. And every night we would sit down and we would go through and we would read something and we'd talk about it together. And we'd pray. And just had to keep believing, because we didn't have anything else, right? It's just, God, you've got to do that. And in those moments, you would sense that God was there and God was present and that he knew what was happening. But when a believer would stop and tell you, we're praying for you, or pray with us, or, just lend support, you knew God was there, because God was using them. And God used so many people through this process. One of the things that just seems so simple and so just, I don't know, just simple. Every few weeks, we would get a postcard from Pastor Joe. I'm praying for you. We have a whole stack of them on the side of the fridge. They're right there. So every day you can see it's right there. And once in a while I pull them out and read through them. They have scriptures on them and just a note, I'm praying for you. And that kind of stuff is just so important and so meaningful, to know that there's people standing with you, and to know that there's people in the church, and there's family, and there's people around the world, literally, that are standing with you. And it was in those moments that we knew we weren't alone, and that God was there, and that he was going to take care of us, and that regardless, we were going to get through it. I mean, there were days that were very, very dark and very difficult, and it was those things that got us through. When we had to go through the second surgery, and as difficult as that was, Carrie and Paula both came and spent most of the day. In fact, Carrie went and got us lunch, make sure that we ate, keep our strength up. And they were such a blessing, and they prayed with us, and they sat with us, and they truly were God's arms wrapping around us,
There were a lot of days where it felt like the day and the night just ran together. There was no end to it. just being in and out of the hospital, there's no windows, you lose all sense of time. We felt very alone a lot of the time, and faith was a real struggle because everything was so hard. And those nights when we would sit and just pray, I felt God was there with us. And sometimes God was all that we had. God was all that I had to hold on to. There was nothing else that could get us through. I struggled with my faith during that time. But like Rich said, the prayers, the support from Tamoka, and the support from friends and family, just hearing that somebody was praying for Johanna, it gave a strength that I couldn't get on my own. I had nothing. I had no strength of my own. I had to hang on to God, and I had to hang on to that faith.
So because of risk of infection, we couldn't bring her to church. And we couldn't, she couldn't be exposed. So we had to keep her basically sequestered for the first 17, 18 months of her life. So she couldn't go out anywhere. She couldn't go do anything because any infection was very dangerous because her heart hadn't been fully repaired yet. And they just, so, you know, you couldn't come in our house unless you sanitized yourself, and you had to have your flu shot, and we didn't take her. We couldn't bring her to church. We really couldn't come to church because we couldn't bring her. And so, you know, the stuff that's online and the, you know, the video sermons and stuff that get put up, the stuff that you guys put up, huge, because that was our only connection for a long time. We wanted to have her dedicated, and so it was between her first and second surgery. Pastor Joe agreed to do it just privately with just us and my mother-in-law, and Carrie and Paula were there. And when we were there, they anointed her with oil and prayed for her. It was an awesome thing to be able to do that dedication, and that they set aside their schedule to do that for us. Was amazing. Johanna is doing fantastic now. She's a healthy 2-year-old, extremely active. She doesn't walk anywhere, she runs. She loves to climb. She climbs on everything. She's so curious. She gets into everything. She's discovered how to vocalize, and that words mean something. And so now she's using her words as loudly and as often as she can. We just had our last cardiology follow-up right at the end of September, and they said everything looks perfect, and in fact, we'd be okay if you just want to come back in a year, which kind of shocked us. And based on past history, we were a little nervous about that. So we're going to go back in April, which he was fine with. But she's doing fantastic, and she's growing, and she's healthy, and she's such a little miracle and such a little gem, and she's a little fireball. She's just go, run all the time. And so, you know, now we have a living testimony in our house, a testament to you know, to God. And Verena mentioned this when we were talking earlier, that, you know, God has a plan for her. You know, and all of this that happened, God's going to use it. There's a plan there.
I don't know what the plan is, but it's going to be something amazing. She is just I'm a blessing, and she is in every sense of the word, a blessing. There's nothing else I can use to describe her. To look at her now, you would never know that she had been through so much. And she will have challenges in the future.
She'll outgrow that pulmonary valve at some point. So we know we are going to have to go through it again, and we know it's going to be hard, but we also know that God's there. So, you know.
I feel like my faith is stronger than it has ever been, being tested and challenged, and now seeing the results of God's miracle in our child. My faith is stronger, and I know that we can get through whatever comes next with her. And we want her to be part of the church. We want her to be active in the church, and she's started coming to Johanna on Wednesdays, and she loves church. We ask her, do you want to go to church? And she runs for the door. We get out of the car, and she's sprinting to come in the door. We went to the pumpkin patch, and she wanted to run in the church.
She didn't want to go. She's like, who cares about the pumpkins? I want to go inside to the church.
She loves it, and we want to make sure that she has that faith as she grows up.
And being able to tell her story, to say, look, God did this in you, and you know, and the thing, one of the things I love is she is the happiest little girl. She isn't fussy. She doesn't cry. She's not. We don't get very many temper tantrums. She's just a very wonderful, happy little girl. A wonderful disposition. And if any child has a reason to be grumpy and complain, she does. After all she's been through, she's not at all. Just a happy, pleasant little thing.